My sister had a baby. I visited the hospital and exposed my husband's secret affair. Elise Carter sat frozen on the edge of her sectional, the neon blur of Los Angeles spilling in through her apartment windows. Her planner was splayed open on the coffee table, flanked by a pile of IVF bills, scribbled appointment reminders, and a half-crumpled schedule for hormone shots. She rubbed her temples and muttered under her breath, "Round freaking 6. Let's go." This whole fertility journey, it was draining her soul. Hope, needles, blood work, crushing disappointment. Repeat. Her husband, Jake, 5 years in, had started fading out like a bad radio signal. He used to hold her hand through every appointment, but lately, always glued to his phone, always out late with some lame excuse about client dinners or emergency calls. Elise wasn't stupid, but she also wasn't ready to dig into that mess, not yet. The baby struggle had already hollowed them both out. She pushed herself off the couch, headed to make some herbal tea, when her phone buzzed. It was her little sister, Maddie. "Yo, you got a sec?" Maddie's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. Elise sighed and sank back into the couch. "Yeah, shoot." "Okay, so, I'm pregnant." Maddie blurted it out, barely containing herself. "Just found out." Elise's heart? Instant freefall. "You're what?" "I know, total accident, but surprise." There was a pause, a long one. "Told Mom and Dad already," Maddie kept going, like she didn't notice the silence. "They're over the moon. Mom legit cried." Elise gripped the armrest like she was bracing for a car crash. Her sister, the one who'd never held a job longer than a semester and still mooched off their parents, was having a baby. And the whole family, they were throwing confetti about it. Meanwhile, Elise had been jabbing herself in the stomach with needles for 2 damn years, tracking ovulation like it was her job. That's great news," she said, forcing a smile into her voice that never reached her eyes. "Really, congrats." "We're throwing a little get-together Saturday," Maddie chirped. "You and Jake gotta come." Elise clenched her jaw and nodded into the silence. "Yeah, of course." "Cool," Elise replied, on autopilot. After hanging up, she just sat there, staring into her own reflection in the black window. Behind her, the wedding photo on the wall practically mocked her. That smiling couple might as well be strangers now. She'd spent her whole damn life checking every box, the responsible one, the one who made her folks proud, the one who held it all together. And now, Maddie, chaotic, unemployed, zero-filter Maddie, was pregnant and getting the royal treatment. No one even knew who the dad was, and still, it was like she'd just hit the damn lottery. That night, over dinner, Elise watched Jake from across the table as he scrolled mindlessly through his phone. "Maddie's pregnant," she said quietly. Jake looked up, barely blinking. "Oh, really?" "Yep, we're invited to some kind of celebration this weekend." He hesitated, then nodded. Good for her. But Elise caught it, that flicker in his eyes. Something cold, something shut off. And it hit her, right in the gut. Saturday came, and Elise stood in front of the mirror, fixing the hem of her navy blue dress, pretending the shaky smile on her lips was real. In the other room, Jake was tying his tie like a robot, not saying a word. They hadn't talked much since Maddie's bombshell. The silence had settled in their home like a permanent layer of dust, quiet but choking everything. They pulled up to her parents' place in Oak Park just after sunset. The front yard was glowing with string lights and little white lanterns. Through the big windows, she could already see people sipping drinks, laughing like this was some damn fairy tale. Soft music floated out into the air, and her mom, of course, had gone all out again. "Let's just get through this," Elise muttered under her breath as she stepped out of the car. Her mom, Margaret, flung the front door open with her signature cheerleader grin. "There you are. Isn't Maddie just glowing?" Elise nodded stiffly. "She looks happy." Inside, it was full baby shower mode. The living room had been decked out in blush pink and gold everything. Balloons, cupcakes with tiny pacifiers on top, and a huge, sparkly banner over the fireplace that read, "Welcome, Baby Evans." Elise blinked. Evans? That was her married name. No one had said a word about Maddie getting married. Before Elise could even wrap her head around that glittery Baby Evans sign, Maddie appeared out of nowhere, wearing a silky blush dress that hugged her tiny bump like it was the main event. "Elise, you came!" she squealed, pulling her into a hug. Elise returned it stiffly, pretending the moment didn't feel like a slap. "Congrats," she said, trying to sound genuine. "Really, I'm glad to be here." Maddie pulled back, just enough to lock eyes. "I didn't want this to be, weird." Elise raised an eyebrow. Why would it be weird? There was the briefest flicker in Maddie's expression. Then she let out this breathy little laugh. "No reason, just hormones, I cry at literally everything these days." As the evening dragged on, Elise drifted through the house like a ghost, fake smiling her way through small talk, sipping a drink she didn't even want. Jake had disappeared. Classic. She found him eventually, out on the back patio, hunched over his phone, voice low, like he didn't want anyone to hear. When she opened the sliding door, he flinched and immediately ended the call. "Who was that?" she asked. "Work. It's Saturday." He shrugged. "Real estate doesn't take weekends off." Elise nodded, but something in her gut twisted hard. And this time, it wasn't the meds. Back inside, her dad, good ol' Rick, stood up, glass of wine in hand. "To family," he said proudly, "to new beginnings, and to our daughter Maddie for giving us the greatest gift of all, our first grandchild." The room erupted in applause. Her mom, Cheryl, was already dabbing tears from her cheeks. "We're so proud of you, honey," she sniffled. Elise forced her glass up into the air. She smiled. She clinked. She pretended. But inside, it burned. She remembered when she told them about the fertility treatments, how her mom went quiet, how her dad looked like someone had handed him a medical bill. No party, no toasts, just awkward concern and quick subject changes. It wasn't a celebration. It was uncomfortable, like her pain was too messy to be honored. After dinner, Cheryl pulled Elise aside, voice dipped in faux concern. "Don't be upset, sweetheart. Your time will come." "I'm not upset," Elise lied, her mouth moving before her brain could stop it. Her mom's voice dropped even lower. "We just didn't want you to feel any pressure, with Maddie's news." Elise blinked. "No pressure? You plastered her baby's name with my last name on every single damn decoration?" Cheryl hesitated, caught, then brushed it off with a forced smile. "Well, she asked for it. Evans just sounded so elegant, and honestly, it's a lovely name." Elise nodded slowly, but her chest tightened like a vice. She had 1,000 questions, none of which she could ask, in a room full of relatives and balloon arches. Later that night, once they were finally home, she asked the one question that had been clawing at the back of her throat all night. Why did Maddie use your last name? Jake froze, then shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe she thought it sounded better?" "Bullshit." And Elise knew it. That was the night she stopped pretending. That was the night she started watching. The days after the baby shower blurred by. At work, Elise functioned on autopilot, throwing together designs, answering emails, but her mind? It was somewhere else entirely. Jake's silence, Maddie's weird little comment, her parents beaming like they'd just won the damn lottery over a baby that wasn't even hers. She didn't want to be paranoid, but her gut had turned into a siren. Then one night, while Jake snored beside her, like he didn't have a care in the world, Elise reached for his phone. Her fingers hesitated, heart thudding like a drum. She didn't want to do this, but she needed answers. Locked. Of course it was locked. With a new passcode. That was new. She set it back down, her fingertips buzzing with guilt and rage. Sleep didn't come, just a ceiling and 1,000 thoughts screaming at her in silence. By the next weekend, she had a plan. "Let's go away for the weekend," she told him. "Just us. Clear our heads. Lake Geneva's not far. 2 days, that's all." Jake said yes almost too fast, didn't even blink. "I'll book the hotel," he offered, stepping into the shower, like it was nothing. Elise just smiled. Let him think this was some romantic escape. In reality, this was recon. Elise opened Jake's laptop and started digging. Casual at first, until she landed on it. Her stomach flipped. It wasn't a couple's getaway. It was a one-night booking at a bland business hotel for one guest, just him. She clicked deeper. Buried in the trash folder of his email, a reservation confirmation for dinner. 2 guests. Upscale. Romantic. Not accidental. Her hands moved fast. Screenshots. Confirmation emails. The hotel receipt. She forwarded everything to a private email account she'd made a few days earlier, just in case. She had a bad feeling, and now it was flashing in red. That afternoon, while Jake claimed he had a meeting in River North, Elise drove across the city. Not to work, not to cry in a bathroom. She drove to Maddie's apartment. Maddie opened the door, wearing one of Elise's old sweatshirts. She knew it instantly. There was a tiny ink stain on the cuff she could spot from across the room. "Oh, hey, everything okay?" Maddie asked, all casual. Elise took a long, shaky breath. "I need to talk to you." "Sure," Maddie said, stepping aside. "Come in." The place smelled like baby powder and lavender. A stroller was folded near the entryway. Lullaby music hummed from a phone docked on a speaker. The whole apartment was calm, quiet, soft. Elise sat on the edge of the couch, back ramrod straight. Then she asked it, "Who's the father?" Maddie stiffened, like someone had slapped her. "Elise, we've talked about this. I told you, it's complicated." "You didn't answer. You said you couldn't say." Maddie crossed her arms, suddenly defensive. "Why are you bringing this up again?" Elise leaned forward, eyes locked. "Because the baby's last name is Evans, my husband's name, and you put it on every single balloon and banner like it meant nothing." There was a pause. 1 second, 2. Long enough for Elise to see it. The flicker, the guilt, the panic, the way Maddie's eyes darted toward the bedroom door, like the truth might try to escape. Elise stood up, voice shaking. "It's him, isn't it? Jake. He's the father." Maddie opened her mouth, closed it. Elise stared her down. "Tell me the truth." Maddie looked away. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It was just once." Elise let out a bitter laugh, sharp as glass. God, that's such a lie. Maddie's eyes brimmed with tears. But Elise wasn't crying. Not anymore. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Maddie choked out. "You were always so tired, always wrapped up in treatments. We were both hurting. It just happened." Elise stared at her, like she didn't recognize the girl sitting across from her. "So what? You comforted each other during pregnancy?" "I didn't plan this," Maddie insisted. "I didn't even tell him at first. But when I found out, he said he wanted to help. He wanted to support me." Elise's legs felt like jelly. Her whole body might collapse at any second. "Do Mom and Dad know?" she asked, voice tight. Maddie hesitated. "Not at first, but yeah, they know now." Elise's breath hitched. They knew, and they still threw that party, still smiled in her face, still asked her, to be on her best behavior. Maddie didn't say a word. Elise turned and walked straight to the door. "Elise, wait!" She didn't. She yanked the door open and stepped into the freezing Chicago air, the wind slicing at her skin, her breath catching in her throat like broken glass. That night, Jake came home late. She was waiting for him, lights off, phone glowing in her hand like a loaded weapon. "How was your business trip?" she asked, eyes fixed on the screen. He paused in the doorway, thrown off. "Exhausting." She looked up. Dead calm. "Remind me again, who's the father of Maddie's baby?" Silence. He froze. "I know, Jake. I know everything." He opened his mouth, but she held up the phone. Pressed play. Her sister's voice filled the room. The confession, the shame, the betrayal. All of it. Jake sank onto the couch, face in his hands, like that might make it all go away. Elise stood there, trembling. "You were never going to tell me, were you?" she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. Her voice cracked. "You used our money, Jake, the money we saved for IVF, for our baby, and you spent it helping raise someone else's." "I was lost," Jake muttered, eyes darting everywhere but hers. "You were obsessed. IVF, the meds, the schedules. Elise cut him off, voice ice cold. "I was trying to build a family with you. You were busy building one behind my back." Her chest was heaving, fury burning up her throat. "Get out." Jake blinked, stunned. "Elise." "Take your keys, take your lies, and get the hell out." The door slammed behind him, like thunder. Elise didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. She just sank to the floor, numb, and started planning, not grieving, plotting. The next morning, Elise sat by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she wasn't even drinking. Outside, the Chicago skyline stretched beneath a cold, washed-out sky. Peaceful, deceptive. Inside her apartment, the wreckage was still everywhere. Not in broken glass or flipped furniture, just silence, heavy and sharp. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cheryl. "Maddie's struggling. Please don't make this harder for her." That was it. No, "I'm so sorry." No, "How are you holding up?" Just worry for the daughter who blew up Elise's life. She stared at the screen, then locked it. No reply. Maddie could rot in that guilt stew by herself. Instead, Elise opened her laptop. She made 3 folders: evidence, finances, legal. And then, a name flickered through her memory: Rachel Langston. They used to pull all-nighters together in college. Now, Rachel was a no-bullshit family lawyer downtown. Elise found her firm's site, clicked Book a Consult and picked the earliest time slot she could. Later that week, she sat across from Rachel in a sleek, glass-walled office that overlooked Millennium Park. Rachel listened. No interruptions, no judgment, just silence and sharp eyes. When Elise finally finished unraveling her mess of a story, Rachel leaned in. Expression unreadable, but there was a spark in her gaze, the kind that said, "We're going to burn them clean." "You've got way more than enough to file for divorce, with cause," Rachel said, flipping through a folder like she was dealing cards in Vegas. Adultery, financial misconduct, emotional harm. Hell, if your parents were involved, we could push for civil liability too. Elise blinked. Wait, you can sue your own parents? Rachel gave her a tight, almost sad smile. In cases of fraud or intentional emotional distress? Yup, it's rare, but possible. Elise let out a slow breath. I don't want revenge. I just want my life back. Then let's start by protecting what's left of it, Rachel said. Within days, Elise had cut the wires clean. Rachel helped her freeze the joint account Jake had been quietly bleeding dry. They set up a fresh personal account, rerouted her paycheck, and made sure all future legal paperwork bypassed him straight to her inbox. No middlemen, no surprises. No one saw it coming, and that's exactly how she wanted it. That weekend, Elise pulled into her parents' driveway. The lawn? Trimmed to perfection. A festive little wreath hung on the door. On the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, everything had rotted. Her mom answered the door, eyes lighting up in surprise. "Elise, where's Jake?" Elise stepped past her, voice calm like still water. "Gone." Cheryl's brow lifted. "You didn't fight over the baby shower, did you? Sweetheart, you've always been a little sensitive." Elise didn't even flinch. She just walked into the living room like she owned the place. "Did you know?" she asked flatly. "That he was cheating on me?" Her mom's expression flickered. Guilt, maybe, or just plain discomfort. "Sweetheart, things happen. People make mistakes." That's not an answer. Her father, Rick, stepped in from the den. "What's going on?" Elise turned to him, cold, direct. "Did you know Jake is the father of Maddie's baby?" Rick's jaw clenched. "We didn't want to believe it." "But you did know." Cheryl reached out to touch her arm. "Maddie was vulnerable. She needed support." Elise pulled away. Her voice cracked. "So did I." Silence. Thick. Awkward. Telling. "You all knew," she whispered. "And you let me sit there at that damn party, clapping like an idiot, smiling for photos, like everything was fine." Her voice trembled. But still, no tears. She was done crying. Rick sighed. "We didn't want to hurt you." Elise let out a bitter laugh that sliced through the air like glass. "No, you didn't want to hurt yourselves. You didn't want to deal with the fallout." "Don't twist this," Cheryl snapped, the fake calm finally cracking. "You always put your career first. You never made room for a family." Elise turned, her expression flat, but razor sharp. "You think I chose infertility?" Cheryl froze, words caught in her throat. "I gave everything to this family, to Jake, to you." Elise's voice shook now, not with sadness, with rage. "And you stood there, clapping like cheerleaders for the baby he made with my sister." She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Dropped it right on the coffee table, like a final verdict. Cheryl stared at it like it might bite her. What's that? Legal notice. Elise's voice was like steel. Divorce proceedings have started, and you'll also be hearing from my attorney about misused funds. Cheryl stepped back, like she'd been slapped. Excuse me? Elise didn't blink. I traced the payments. Money from Jake and me went straight to Maddie's rent, her prenatal bills, all of it, with your help. Rick rubbed his face, suddenly looking 10 years older. God, Cheryl, tell me that's not true. Cheryl said nothing. That silence, that was enough. Elise turned and walked toward the door. Wait, Rick called out. What are you going to do now? She paused, hand on the knob, didn't even look back. I'm going to rebuild, without any of you. That night, back in her apartment, Elise curled up on the couch, exhausted, but free. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. She didn't know exactly what the future looked like, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't be crawling through it. She'd rise. The days that followed ticked by like a machine. Smooth, mechanical, ruthless. Elise split into two people. One of them wore lipstick, answered emails, nailed presentations, laughed in elevators like nothing was wrong. The other, she stayed up late, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by folders and receipts. She read every contract, flagged every transaction, reviewed line by line with Rachel until her eyes burned and her laptop overheated. Her apartment? It wasn't a home anymore. It was a war room. Evidence folders lined the dining table, like soldiers in formation. In the hallway, a whiteboard scrawled with names, dates, wire transfers, and connections created a murder board-worthy web of betrayal. Jake, Maddie, Cheryl, even Rick, who swore up and down he didn't know, had transactions traced straight back to joint accounts. The deeper she dug, the tighter the noose got. But underneath the rage, the spreadsheets, the legal paperwork, there was still a woman in mourning. One night, Elise stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth on autopilot. Then she caught her reflection and froze. Her cheekbones looked sharper now. Her eyes held shadows that hadn't been there before. A tiny scar on her chin, something from a clumsy, drunken fall in college, stood out like a badge. She leaned closer and whispered to herself, "You're still here." That weekend, Elise drove out to Lake Forest, a quiet suburb just north of Chicago. Tree-lined streets, joggers, silence. She was there to tour a new apartment complex tucked behind tall maples and winding trails. Clean, calm, unknown. The leasing agent handed her a key. "You're the first to see this unit. It's our most secluded corner, perfect for fresh starts." Elise stepped inside. The sunlight poured through giant windows, lighting up empty wooden floors. No photos, no echoes, no ghosts. Only potential. "I'll take it," she said. No hesitation. Later that night, her phone buzzed. Jake. The first text in weeks. "Jake, I think we should talk." Elise stared at the screen. It wasn't fury that hit her. It was clarity. "Elise, anything you want to say can go through my lawyer." He replied fast. "Please, just one conversation. No lawyers. I need to explain." She didn't answer. Instead, she booked the movers. If there was going to be a final confrontation, it would be on her terms. The next morning, she sat across from Rachel, eyes sharp, tone steady. "I want full financial restitution. I want my name off every joint loan, and I want it done fast." Rachel nodded. We can move quickly. The evidence is airtight. But, she paused, are you ready to see them in court? Elise looked out the window at the rising city skyline. I'm not afraid of them anymore. And she meant it. Fear had been replaced by something fiercer, truth. At work, she was different now, sharper, focused. She started cutting the fat, declining meetings that drained her, pulling her name off fluff projects, zeroing in on what actually mattered. When a stalled product launch hit a wall, Elise didn't wait for permission. She took it over, redesigned the entire campaign, laser-focused, bulletproof. People were starting to notice the shift. After a team meeting, Victoria, Elise's boss, pulled her aside. Something's different about you. Elise offered the faintest smile. I stopped apologizing. Later that afternoon, walking past the cafe near her office, Elise caught a familiar figure through the glass. Rick, her dad, sitting alone with a half-empty coffee, scrolling his phone like the world outside didn't exist. His shoulders slumped, his hair grayer than she remembered. He looked smaller, dimmer. She froze for a second, watching him from the sidewalk. And then she kept walking. Not out of spite, not even anger, out of self-preservation. By Friday, the final stack of legal documents was ready. Elise combed through every word, every clause. Infidelity, fraud, emotional damage. Every betrayal had been given a name. Every injustice carved in ink. She signed. Not with fury, not with tears, just certainty. That night, surrounded by half-packed boxes and paperwork, her doorbell rang. Elise opened the door, and there stood Maddie, a diaper bag hanging off one shoulder, a baby carrier in hand. Inside it, a baby with sleepy eyes and Jake's unmistakable cleft chin. I didn't know where else to go, Maddie whispered. Elise stared at them both for a long beat, then stepped aside. 10 minutes, she said. Then you leave. Maddie sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, like the floor might collapse beneath her. I didn't expect any of this, she said softly. I didn't plan everything out. Elise crossed her arms. You didn't have to plan it. She looked at Maddie, dead in the eye. You chose it. Maddie looked up, tears swimming in her eyes. I wanted what you had. Elise didn't flinch. You mean the life I built while you floated through yours? No, Maddie whispered, her voice cracking. I wanted to matter, to Mom, to someone. Something pulled tight in Elise's chest, but she didn't soften. You did matter. You just let jealousy rot you from the inside out. Maddie glanced down at the baby in her arms. I thought Jake would stay. I thought this would be enough. Elise shook her head, slowly. He was never yours. Not really. Silence. Elise walked to the door. I wish you peace, she said, her voice like glass. But not here. Maddie stood, cradling the baby. I'm sorry, she whispered. Elise nodded once. I know. Then added, quietly but firmly, but that doesn't fix it. The door clicked shut behind them, and Elise turned back to her half-tacked apartment, her half-finished life. There were still battles ahead, but for the first time, she didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like the architect of what came next. 6. The courtroom was colder than she expected. Not the air, the energy. Sterile, heavy, like the moment right before lightning hits. Elise sat at the plaintiff's table next to Rachel, her back straight, her hands calm. a stack of printed evidence in front of her, every betrayal documented, categorized, ready for war. Behind her, a few rows of benches held quiet supporters, co-workers who knew the truth, a handful of extended family who had finally opened their eyes and stepped back from the scandal. Her father? Absent. At the other table sat Jake, clean-shaven, navy suit, trying to look like none of this was getting to him. Next to him, Cheryl, her mother, wearing pearls like armor, her mouth set in a tight line, her eyes flicked toward Elise now and then, part guilt, part pride, part denial. Maddie wasn't there, not anymore. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Elise didn't look at Jake, not once. And when Rachel stood to deliver her opening statement, Elise stared straight ahead, unshaken. The truth had already been spoken. Now, it was time to make it law. Rachel's voice cut through the courtroom, calm, measured, and sharp enough to slice skin. "This case isn't just about a failed marriage," she began. "It's about betrayal, financial misconduct, and a deliberate, coordinated effort to deceive a woman who poured years of her life, her trust, and her finances into a family that chose to break her instead." Jake's lawyer stood, launched into a rebuttal, something about misunderstandings, emotional confusion, blurred lines between family loyalty and personal choices. Elise didn't blink. She didn't fidget. She waited. Her truth was coming. And when the evidence started rolling, the room shifted. Projected on the courtroom screens were bank statements, lines of transactions rerouted from their fertility fund to other things, receipts, designer baby gear, a deposit for Maddie's apartment. Some items were even under Vanessa's name, a fake alias Jake had used for purchases. A digital paper trail of deceit. Rachel stepped forward, holding out a flash drive. "We also have audio recordings, Your Honor." The judge gave a single nod. "Proceed." Elise sat still as stone as the playback began. "She has no idea. At least she's good for the money. She can't get pregnant. This baby's the one that counts. She's so focused on work, she won't even notice." Every sentence landed like a blade. Some spectators gasped. And then came Cheryl's voice, Elise's mother. Cruel, clipped, oozing disdain. Let her believe what she wants. As long as Maddie and the baby are taken care of, Elise can stay in her fantasy world. Cheryl flinched as her own words filled the courtroom. When it ended, the silence was deafening. The judge turned slowly to Jake. "Do you deny these statements or the authenticity of these recordings?" Jake opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. Finally, Jake mumbled, "I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt her." Elise stood. No tears, no shouting, just steel in her spine. "With respect, Your Honor," she said clearly, "intent doesn't erase consequence." She didn't need to cry. She didn't need to plead. Her power was in her stillness. And now, everyone could feel it. "I lost years of my life," Elise said, her voice firm, clear, "trying to build a family with a man who was secretly building one behind my back." She glanced across the courtroom, at Jake, at Cheryl, then back to the judge. "My mother enabled it. My sister stole from me. I'm not here asking for pity. I'm asking for justice, not just for what they took, but because people like this think they can walk away untouched." The judge gave a single nod. Understood. After a brief recess, the ruling came down, swift, clean. The court officially recognized Elise's claim: adultery, misuse of joint assets, intentional emotional harm. Jake ordered to pay heavy financial restitution. Cheryl required to return every dollar funneled through her personal support transfers. Full ownership of the couple's remaining assets granted to Elise. But it was the judge's final words that stayed with her. "Justice isn't revenge," he said. "It's a restoration." Elise stepped out of the courthouse, into the bright bite of autumn air. The city moved around her, fast, indifferent. Rachel walked just behind her. Reporters shouted questions, but Elise didn't flinch. Jake avoided her eyes. Good. It was over. But it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of something entirely new. 1 year later. Elise Hartley stood by the window of her new office, 5th floor, Lincoln Park West, watching the trees below burn gold and copper in the October light. The sign on the glass outside read, "Hartley & Co., Personal Brand Plus Image Strategy." Once, this had been just a whispered dream, something she'd mumbled to Rachel between tears during late-night strategy sessions. A fantasy born from burnout and betrayal. Now, it was real, not built out of spite, built out of necessity, out of knowing exactly who she was and never letting anyone rewrite her story again. She had rebuilt her life, not in some cinematic flash, but brick by brick. Late nights, bold choices, fierce boundaries. She was no longer the woman begging to be chosen. Now, she chose herself. Her assistant, June, popped her head into the office. "New client confirmed for next week. High profile, but super low-key. Wants the full brand reset." Elise smiled, without even looking up. "Good. Let's make 'em shine." Since the verdict, her consulting firm had blown up fast. Her old life as a fashion buyer, it gave her edge, industry clout. But what really made her name? The courtroom story. It didn't just give her visibility, it gave her respect. Women from all over the country slid into her inbox, some freshly divorced, others just done being overlooked, erased, or lied to. Elise didn't just help them dress better, she helped them own the damn room. Her phone buzzed. A text from her dad. "Walter, dinner still on? Bringing your favorite from Hyde Street Deli. 7 sharp, don't forget the extra mustard." Elise grinned and typed back quickly. Walter had been her anchor through the entire storm. Quiet, solid, loyal. After the trial, he'd finally separated from Cheryl. He never said the words, but she could see it, clear in his eyes. The betrayal broke something in him, too. Cheryl had tried reaching out. Voicemails, handwritten letters, even a sad little drop-in at her building once. But Elise, she never answered. Some wounds, they don't get cleaned. They get closed. Not today. Maybe not ever. As for Jake and Maddie, their relationship fizzled, fast, within months of the ruling. The city whispered, "Chicago real estate isn't kind to snakes." Jake's reputation tanked, and so did his job. But Elise didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. She had better things to focus on, like designing empires and living a life where no one else writes the narrative but her. Her breath caught in her chest. "Already?" Walter nodded, smiling gently. "The agency confirmed it. You'll get your first meeting with Ava next month." Elise ran her fingers across the envelope in her lap. Ava, the 8-year-old she'd met at a charity event her firm hosted months ago. A foster kid with a shy smile, a sketchbook full of dress designs, and eyes that looked so much like Elise's had at that age. Wide, watchful, hungry for something solid. "You're going to be a great mom," Walter said softly. "Better than the one you had." Tears threatened, but Elise blinked them away. Not now. not yet. I want her to know she's wanted from the start," she whispered. "Not tolerated, not hidden, not buried under anyone's shame." Walter placed a hand on hers. "She'll know, because she'll have you." Outside, snow had started to fall, soft flakes catching in the streetlights, turning the city into something still and quiet. Elise walked over to the window, parting the curtains. She stood there for a moment, staring out, not into memory, but into something new. She thought of the girl she used to be, the woman staring out from a high-rise window, aching for a dream that never belonged to her. And then she thought of Ava, of Saturday pancakes and bedtime stories, of showing her how to braid her hair, of teaching her how to walk into a room with her head high and never let anyone shrink her. Elise didn't just want to be a mother. She wanted to be someone's safe place. There's a quiet kind of courage in walking away from the people who once defined your world. For Elise, it wasn't just the betrayal, not Jake, not Maddie. It was the deeper hurt. The moment she realized the people she trusted most saw her pain as disposable. But she didn't crumble. She reconstructed, brick by brick, choice by choice. She poured years into her career, into fertility treatments, into holding together a marriage that had been rotting for ages. And now she was building something better, not out of survival, out of love. What Elise didn't realize back then was that blood doesn't define family. Loyalty does. Truth does. When her world collapsed, it wasn't titles or traditions that carried her forward. It was her own quiet strength, her father's unwavering presence, and the deep, unshakable dignity of a woman who refused to stay broken. The most powerful part of Elise's story, it was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming. She didn't just leave. She took her life back, piece by piece, brick by brick. And in doing so, she proved something we all need to hear. Starting over isn't failure. It's an act of hope, especially for those of us who've lived long enough to know that healing sometimes means building something entirely new. Elise's journey reminds us it's never too late to redefine what home looks like or what love truly means. And when she chose to adopt little Ava, she didn't just rewrite her own ending. She rewrote the beginning of an entirely new story. Because real family, it's not who shares your name, it's who shows up, who chooses you, and who never lets go.